Hello and welcome to today's Wednesday webinar. My name is Danai and I am an English teacher. Today's webinar, we're going to be focusing on narrative writing. And so if you can hear me, just say hello. And also, it would be great if you could type in what exam board you're with. So today we're going to be looking at narrative writing. And it would be great if you could please type in what exam board you're with. I'm going to be briefly looking at the mark schemes for AQA, EDUCAS, EdExcel, and OCR. I always forget one of them. Hello Ray. I hope I've said that right. What exam board are you with? AQA, thank you, Ina. I hope I'm saying that correctly as well. AQA, great, thank you. Okay, because I know it could be any one of those. Most people do AQA, but it's just good to get an idea. Okay, so as I've said, if you weren't there when I said it already, my name is Anai. I'm an English teacher. I qualified in 2017 and I worked in secondary schools until 2022. And I love teaching, hence why I'm still teaching. And today we are focusing on narrative writing. So narrative writing is something everyone has to do. And it's a very big question. It's worth a lot of marks. And it's worth 50% basically of your GCSE, because you have to do not necessarily narrative writing, but you have to do writing for your paper 2 as well. And that's worth 40 marks. So it's a question that can make a huge difference in terms of how you perform overall in your GCSE. So out of those 40 marks, 24 are awarded for content and organization, okay? And so we are going to be focusing on that, but I will show you some both AO5 and AO6. So to put it simply, AO5 is how you organize your story, and then AO6 is how you use SPAG in your story. So spelling, punctuation, and grammar. So AQA and all the other examples, they use the same objectives, okay? AO5, AO6. And so your mark schemes, like I said, that's AQA, EdExcel, OCR, and EDUCAS. They split the marks the exact same way: 24 for organization AO5, 16 for SPAG. But to understand what they're all looking for, okay, I had a look through all the mark schemes, okay, and I've summarized basically what they want from you, okay. So I've put it really simply, okay. You are being asked to write an interesting story told using big words well and organized in a way that puts the message of the story across in a clear and interesting way. That is basically what you are being asked to do, okay. And the different examples, they have different wordings like convincing, compelling, ambitious, sustained. And some of the things that we are going to look at today are to make sure that we're hitting those things, okay? So one of the key things is sustained, okay? Meaning they don't want to just see you use language techniques really well in your first paragraph or use great vocabulary just at the start of your story. It has to be sustained, and that comes with planning. So that's why the focus of today's session is going to be planning, okay? We're going to be planning, learning how to plan your story. Hi, Isma, welcome. I just said to everyone before who joined a little bit earlier, just please type in your exam board. I know we've got AQA definitely in the house. So whatever exam board you're with, just please type it in. As I'm just saying now, they are all asking for the same thing. So I will repeat that summary. So it's a very simplified summary, just to make sure we're all clear on what the exam board once according to the mark scheme. They want you to write an interesting story told using big words, well, and organized in a way that puts the message of the story across in a clear and interesting way. Okay, so that's my summary of the words on the left of your screen, which were taken from the different mark schemes. Okay, so you will be asked a range of questions, but the questions are all very open. Okay, so I've put an example. So, for example, these are all past paper questions. So, OCR, before it asks, it seemed to me like I had been magically transported. Use this as the title of a story. A past paper from Educast, past paper question, write about a time when you were asked to babysit, or write a story which ends, I knew I had been very selfish. Okay, great, Educast, good. Thank you for sharing that. And then AQA, write a story about an event that cannot be explained. So that's a past paper question from AQA. And then EdExcel, write about what it would be like to live in the future. Your response could be real or imagined. So the point I'm trying to get across by showing you these questions is that they're quite open, okay? Meaning you have a lot of room to plan your own, plan different aspects of the story, okay, to get prepared for the exam, okay? Because you don't have to go there blank, knowing nothing about what you're going to write and just waiting for the question and then waiting to actually think about what you will write when you see the question. There's a lot of things that you can have clear in your mind before you actually get into the exam, and then you can adapt the things that you've practiced, okay? In the same way that you practice all the other questions where you are clear on the structure. So for example, you might understand that you need PEE or PETAL, whatever acronym you use at school, to write your paragraphs responding to language and structure analysis and things like that. So for your story, you need to go in prepared, okay? And we are going to look at how to do that, okay? So we're briefly going to look at an extract. So if you've attended previous webinars, we've looked at this extract, but we've looked at it analyzing. So we're not going to analyze the extract, but we are going to look at how we can learn from it, and it's as an example of a short story, okay? So this extract is a good example of what you are expected to produce in the exam in terms of length, in terms of how it's organized, and how well it puts its story across. So the story is an extract taken from a novel, the beginning of a novel. Right, so we'll have a read. So it was snowing again. Gentle six-pointed flakes from a picture book were settling on her jacket sleeve. The mountain air prickled with ice and the smell of pine resin. Several hundred meters below lay the dark outline of St. Bernard on Horse, where the Pyrenean resort village across the west, the irregular peaks of the mountain range. Zoe pulled the air into her lungs, feeling the crackling cold of it before letting go. And when the mountain seemed to nod and sigh back at her, she almost thought she could die in that place, and happily. If there are few moments in life that come as clear and as pure as ice, when the mountain breathed back at her, Zoe knew that she had trapped one such moment and that it could never be taken away. Everywhere was snow and silence, the complete arrest of life, a rehearsal and a pre-echo of death. She pointed her skis down the hill. They looked like weird talons of bright red and gold in the powder snow as she waited, ready to swoop. I am alive. I am an eagle. The sun was up now. In a few minutes, there would be more skiers to break the eerie morning spell. But right now, they had the snow and the morning entirely to themselves. There was a whisper behind her. It was the effortless track of Jack's skis as he came over the ridge and caught up with her. This is perfection. You ready to go? She asked. Yep, let's do it. They got up early to beat the holiday-making hordes for this first run of the morning, because this, the tranquility, the silence, the undisturbed snow, and the feeling of proximity to an eagle's flight was what it was all about. Jake hit the west side of the steep but broad slope, and she took the east, carving matching parallel tracks through the fresh snow. But at the edge of the slope, near the curtain of trees, she felt a small slab of snow slip from underneath her. It was like she'd been bucked, so she took the fall line to recover her balance. Before she dropped 300 meters, the whisper, sorry, had been displaced by a rumble. Zoe saw at the periphery of her vision that Jake had come to a halt at the side of the piste and was now looking back at the slope. Irritated by the false start they'd made, she etched a few turns before skidding to a halt and turning to look back at her husband. The rumble became louder. There was a pillar of what looked like grey smoke unfurling in silky banners at the head of the slope, like the heraldry of armies. It was beautiful. It made her smile. Then her smile iced over. Jake was speeding straight towards her. His face was rubberized, and he mouthed something as he flew at her. Get to the side! Get to the side! She knew now that it was an avalanche. Jake slowed, batting her with the ski pole. Get into the trees! Hang onto a tree! The rumbling had become a roaring in her ears, drowning Jake's words. She pushed herself down the fall line, scrambling for traction, trying to accelerate away from the roaring cloud breaking behind her like a tsunami at sea. Jagged black cracks appeared in the snow in front of her. She angled her skis towards the side of the slope, heading for the trees, but it was too late. She saw Jake's black suit go bundling past her as it was turned by the great mass of smoke and snow. Then she too was punched off her feet and carried through the air, twisting, spinning, turning in the whiteout. She remembered something about spreading her arms around her head. For a few moments, it was like being agitated inside a washing machine, turned head over heels a few times until at last she was dumped heavily in a rib crackling fall. Then there was a chattering noise, like the amplified jaws of a million termites chewing on wood. The noise itself filled her ears and muffled everything. And then there was silence, and the total whiteness faded to grey and then to black. So that's a good example of a short story, okay? Even though this is not a short story, it's taken from the beginning of a book, it could be a short story in itself. And one thing I want you to take from this is the span of time that this story took place in, okay? When you are planning your story for the exam, it doesn't have to take place over days or years or months or anything like that. You're not writing a movie or a novel. You are writing a very short story in 45 minutes. So your story shouldn't really span over a day, okay? In fact, the shorter the time span, the better. Because if we look at this story, right, it started with the character Zoe and Jake. It started with her just looking at the scenery, enjoying the scenery, okay? And it takes place maybe within 5-10 minutes, okay? But look how much is able to be fit in within that time in terms of description, okay? So do not think whatsoever that your story has to take place over a long period of time, okay? It could take place within 10 minutes and you could write an excellent story. And in fact, I would say aim for your story to not take place, certainly not over 24 hours. Keep it to within an hour. Keep your events within that time, because you don't want to get into a situation where you're rambling on and your story doesn't have enough tension or interest, okay, within that time. So you've only got 45 minutes. You're not being asked to write a novel or a movie, okay? You're asked to really write a short story. So keep the time frame within no more than an hour, I would say. No more than an hour. your event should take place in. So the other things I wanted you to pick up on, okay, I'll ask you this question actually. You could give me some feedback on this in just in the comments, okay? Where is the example? Can you see an example of foreshadowing? So the story ends with basically Zoe under the avalanche, and we can assume maybe that she's dead, okay? So it ends on a bit of a cliffhanger. It's not quite clear, but it seems as though she's dead. Can we see the example of foreshadowing in this story? If we look at the very beginning, those first 3 paragraphs, where do we see an example of foreshadowing? Just to be clear, foreshadowing is when a writer hints at the ending. So let's assume Zoe's died at the end, okay? Even though it's not very clear, it is suggested. So let's just assume she died at the end of the story. Where is the example of foreshadowing? Where is the hint that she's going to die? Second paragraph, good, okay, excellent. So it says she almost thought she could die in that place, okay? And it also says that a rehearsal and pre-echo of death, okay, in the third paragraph. So the point I want to make with this is that in your planning, okay, for you to be able to use a technique like foreshadowing, which would be a great technique if you could use it, you need to actually plan, okay? Do not skip planning your story in the actual exam. And do even better than that, okay, make sure you have some sort of plan before you go into the exam, okay? You might not use exactly what you planned, but at least you've got something to work with, okay? So before you write your story, know your ending before your beginning, okay? Whether you're planning it in the exam itself, whether you're planning before, know your ending before you start, because then you can use techniques like foreshadowing, okay? So some of the best planning, like I said, that you can do is before the exam. So you can plan your characters, you can plan your plots, meaning the things that happen, the events that happen in your story. You can plan your setting. You can plan the vocabulary that you will use. We know that the exam board wants you to use ambitious, sophisticated vocabulary. You can plan which words you want to use. You can plan which language techniques you want to use, structure techniques, and punctuation as well. So I'm going to talk you through this, okay, how you can do that. And it would be great to make this really valuable for you this time today. Make sure you actually write this out, okay, somewhere and keep it. So, like I said, these are the things that you are being marked on, and you can make sure you give yourself the best chance of hitting these objectives by planning it, okay? By planning. So, we are going to talk through some of the things that you can plan, okay? So, we're starting with vocabulary, okay? So you can plan 8 to 12 ambitious words that you can use. And ambitious vocabulary just means big words, okay? The exam, some of the mark schemes use the word ambitious, but it just means big words. So what do I mean by that? So I've put a list here, okay? So you can write this list down, okay? You can add to this list and you can think about your own story. When you come to planning your own story, you might think, actually, my story might be suited to this group of words, okay, and you plan. So this is an example. You can just take this and use it, okay, or you can plan your own. So for example, red, crimson, okay. You can, instead of saying red, you can say crimson, crimson. Green, you can describe something as emerald. Blue, azure. Happy, you can say delighted instead. Scared, petrified, okay? Sad, better say melancholic, and the list goes on, okay? So when you are planning your vocabulary, okay, think about how the best word that you can use, the most ambitious word that you can use. And again, this is not something that you should leave or you have to leave until the day itself. These are words that you can plan. These are words that you can memorize. These are words that you can take into the exam with you. Okay. Some people are naturally talented writers. They can just write amazing things. Okay. But sometimes we need preparation. Okay. Even the best writers need to prepare. You know your exam is coming. So plan and remember this vocabulary. Okay. So those are some examples. And then language techniques, okay? You can also think about the techniques that you want to use, okay? So you can maybe use rhetorical questions, similes, hyperbole, repetition, personification, metaphor, oxymoron, juxtaposition, pathetic fallacy, onomatopoeia. By writing it clearly down before you actually write, it gives you a checklist, okay? It gives you a checklist so that you make sure that you use it. In the exam, there's so much pressure in terms of time and just the natural stress of an exam. You can make it easier for yourself by creating this checklist even in the exam, where when you are writing your narrative writing section, you are told to plan, okay, and you have space to plan. So literally these are the things that can go into your plan, okay. Right, next, punctuation. You're marked on your use of accurate punctuation and your accurate use of punctuation, but also the range of punctuation, okay? Meaning go beyond full stops, commas. Of course, you need those apostrophes, but you need a range, okay? So things that you can use to show that range are exclamation marks for emphasis, question marks, okay, at the end of a question or rhetorical question, quotation marks in dialogue, ellipses, okay, so that those three dots to indicate some information has been omitted. This can actually add suspense. And then colons, you can use them a range of ways, but to simplify it, you can just use it to replace the word and, okay? So where you might use the word and, replace it with a colon. This applies to other coordinating conjunctions. What do I mean by that? I mean conjunctions like and, but, so, yet. You can replace those with a colon, okay? So you can just simplify it for yourself in that way. And then a semicolon can be used to replace subordinating conjunctions like because or although or even though, nevertheless. You can replace those with a semicolon, okay? So again, to simplify it, you can use it to replace the word because. Next thing is structure, okay? So plan the structure techniques that you're going to use. As we've already looked at in the story, use of foreshadowing, okay, can be very effective. But again, you have to know your end before you actually start in order to use it, because foreshadowing means hinting about the ending, okay? Minor sentences, okay, so that could be a one-word sentence. One sentence paragraphs as well can be very effective at creating drama or emphasis. Use of triples and cyclical structure. So a cyclical or circular structure is where your character ends up where they started from. Okay, that's a very effective technique and quite a simple one as well that you can use, and you will be rewarded for it because it shows that creative use of structure. So there you go. There are all the four elements that we've just talked through on one screen. Okay. So vocabulary. Sorry, I put the wrong one there. The first one's supposed to be vocabulary. There's one missing there. Anyway, we'll start with the second one. So we've got the vocabulary, then we've got the punctuation, then we've got the structure techniques that you can use. Okay. So when you are planning, okay, you can do this on a piece of paper. Okay. And the key thing here is you want to be able to remember it for the exam. So you need to repeat this, okay, so that you don't forget. Excuse me. Right. So the next part that we're going to plan is planning the plot. Okay. So you're planning what actually happens in your story. Now, when it comes to this, this is an example, and you can actually this is a very bare example, and you can copy this. Okay, you can actually copy this. It's quite it's vague, but it's got enough there to be a solid structure. So, what you always want with your story is to s- increase the tension, okay, and then quickly end your story after that, okay? But your story always has to start with wherever it starts, okay? You have to have an emotion that gets worse before it gets better, okay? Or an emotion that gets worse before it comes to an end. It doesn't have to get better, okay? Because some stories don't have necessarily a happy ending, so it doesn't have to get better. But the key thing is there must be some sort of increase in tension, whether it's increasing anticipation, like your character can't wait for something, so you've got an increase in excitement, or you've got an increase in tension. Perhaps your character is afraid and you increase that sense of fear and tension. That's what keeps your writing interesting. Okay. So, this is an example of a plot. Okay. So, you in a minute I'm going to ask you to come up with some scenarios. Okay. That can fit into this plot. So, let's just say paragraph one, your main character is looking forward to something. Okay. So have a think, what could something that someone could be looking forward to be? Okay. Have a think about potentially your main character. Would what who or what would that be? Paragraph two, describe them on their way to getting the thing they have been looking forward to. Okay. So on their way there to whatever they're looking forward to, you can insert positive descriptions maybe of the weather and things they see on the way there. Now, I've put weather there because there you are using pathetic fallacy, which is when the weather is indicative or shows you how the character is feeling or how they are in general. Okay. And then paragraph three, they arrive at the destination, but they are unable to get the thing they want. So, for example, they're late, rejected, or stood up. So, in the middle of your story, that's usually where you need to have your turning point, okay? Where something happens that changes the story or changes the emotion in the story or changes the events in your story. It's usually referred to as the climax, but there's a big it's a big note of some sort, whether it's a big change or a big increase in tension. Okay. But this is where there is the most intensity in your story, intensity of emotion, okay, because something has changed. So here we can see that this character's been looking forward to something, they get there, okay, and they can't get what they want, okay. And then paragraph four, you can then describe them going back to where they started, okay? And now we might have negative descriptions of the weather or things that they see on the way. So now again, we are using pathetic fallacy, but we're also adding some contrast in because we're contrasting how they were, how they felt as they were going, and therefore our descriptions, okay, match. And that's again feeding into what the exam mark scheme wants us to do, which is to show to put across our message clearly. Okay, sometimes it's referred to as coherence and cohesion, but it basically means that you're putting across your message clearly. So if your character's feeling in a particularly negative way, everything should match that. Okay. Then finally, paragraph five, they arrive home, okay, and the thing they think they and they sorry, there's a typo there. The thing they wanted is waiting for them, or they shut the door and sob uncontrollably. So at the end of it, you can choose your ending. They either get what they want, okay. So perhaps what they went out for is actually at home somehow, or they don't get what they want and they're distraught and they shut the door and they're just crying. Okay, you could end your story however you want, but that's an example of how you can organize events. Again, you can literally copy this plot and you can change it by inserting your characters and different details. which I'm actually going to ask you to do now, okay? I want you to see if you can think of scenarios, okay, that you can fit into this. So I've just said someone, okay, looking forward to something. So for example, someone could be meeting someone for a date, okay? And you can then insert that into that plot line where in your first paragraph, you describe your character looking forward to it, okay? And then in your next paragraph, you focus maybe on their journey there, okay? And the weather and what they see. And then they arrive there, but they don't get what they want, okay? Maybe the person stood them up, okay? Or perhaps they were late and the person decided, I'm going, whatever, okay? So that's an example of a scenario. So somebody's going on a date. But what other scenarios could we use to fit into this story? So you can have a think. We'll say 5 minutes, but if you think of anything within that time, I'll put the timer on. You can begin to type in some of the scenarios that you can think of. And again, this is an exercise that you can do in your planning for your narrative writing, okay? Plan different scenarios that you can potentially use. But anyway, for this task, you've got 5 minutes, okay, to plan your scenarios starting now. Okay, so we're over halfway through. So again, what scenarios can you think of that can fit into that plot line? So you can type it in. You can actually type it in. Make sure you write them down for yourself to keep, but also you can type them in and share. Just over 1 minute left, and then I'll show you some examples of scenarios. So it doesn't have to be complicated. It's a super simple scenario. For example, someone is meeting someone for a date. What else could you have? What other scenarios? Okay, so time is up. Right, I'll show you some, and then if you want to, you can type some in. Okay, so like I said, could be someone meeting someone for a date. Okay, so that's where they're going. And then it could be someone going to get exam results. Okay, so again, they're looking forward to something. Maybe they're expecting to do really well. They get there, they don't do so well. You describe the journey back. Okay, somebody is going to catch a flight. So again, somebody's looking forward to it. You describe their journey there, and then you describe their journey back. Someone is adopted and they're going to meet their birth mother. That could be an example. That could be one as well. You could have a groom on the way to his wedding. That could be quite dramatic either way, okay, especially if they don't get what they want. So a wedding is a good one, okay, because it's highly emotive. Or a bride on their way on the way to her wedding. So these are simple scenarios that just start to get you thinking about what your story will be about. So now I don't want you to just take this as an example and oh yeah, that would be a good idea. Okay, I'll write it down later or tomorrow. Write it down now. Okay, think about a scenario. Okay, write it down because the whole idea of this planning is to make sure that you go walk in the exam room with something in mind already. Okay, don't go in there blank. It's a creative writing question, but you need tools to actually be creative. Okay, so you're not necessarily you're obviously not necessarily walking in there with a full story. You will have practice stories. You should definitely practice stories. Okay, but in your mind, you should walk in to the exam with something. Okay, so write down a scenario that you think, okay, I like this scenario, or maybe if this is giving you some ideas, if these examples have given you ideas, okay, write it down. We are going to be having a go at writing an opening paragraph. So pick a scenario, okay? So everyone now, pick a scenario either from the ones on the screen or one that you thought of. Pick a scenario that you are going to use to write your opening paragraph because that's the next thing that we're going to be doing. Well, not the very next thing, but what will the final thing that we'll be doing. So from the scenarios on the screen, I would like everyone, if you're comfortable doing so, just type in which one you would like to do. Okay. So I want you to pick one. Which scenario would you write your would you use for your story? Meeting someone for a date, going to get exam results, going to catch a flight, an adopted person going to meet their birth mother, a groom on the way to his wedding, or a bride on the way to her wedding. Which one of those are you going to pick? Or if you've picked your own, what are you going to go for? Okay, thank you. So I'm going to display some of these. So we've got going to catch a flight, good. Going for a birthday party at a local ski center, interesting. Good, you've taken some inspiration from the story. Watch a film with my cousin who I haven't seen for a couple of years. Okay, good. Okay. So whatever you've picked, remember your aim is to fit it into that frame, okay, of those paragraphs where they're disappointed in the middle, okay? We want lots of emotion in the middle, and they go back to where they started from, basically, which helps us include a cyclical structure. Okay, excellent. Thank you for everyone who shared their scenarios. Right, the next thing I want you to do is now be more specific about your scenario. Okay, now I'm going to give you 3 minutes for this, and this is helpful because it helps to add complexity. Okay, by adding an emotive aspect to your story. Okay, so if there are no emotional consequences to your story, then your story is likely going to be quite boring. The higher the consequence or higher the stakes, the more interesting and engaging that your story is going to be. One of the things that is mentioned in a few of the exam mark schemes is having complex ideas. Okay, and if you have an emotive aspect to your story, that can add a level of complexity to the ideas that you are presenting. Okay, so do we write it like, yes, you are writing it as if or someone invented. So to your question, because I know so I'll just display the question so everybody knows the question. So do you write it like if it was or someone invented? So I'm thinking you're saying, are we writing it as if it's real or if it's made up? Now, it doesn't matter because the examiner's not going to know, okay? You are just writing it, write it as a story. It's up to you whether you base it on a real event. So I know Edit Style specifically does say this can be real or imagined, and it's exactly as is. You can write a story about something that actually happened in your life, in your exam. The thing that matters is all the things that we've talked about, making sure you've planned it well, you're using vocabulary, ambitious vocabulary, you're using structure techniques, okay? Because if you use, for example, a real story and you have just relayed it from beginning to end in a boring way, and you've just listed what happened, you haven't used, paragraphs in an interesting way or ambitious vocabulary, you're not going to get rewarded for that. So it can be either way, okay? So in terms of you knowing whether it's real or imagined, but the way you write it needs to be in an interesting way, okay? It needs to be an interesting way. So yes, you can, yeah, I hope that answers the question. So if you want in the exam, you could say, this is based on a real story, and then it's fake, right? But you're doing it for effect to say, this is based on a real story. Or you could say that simply because of that, but you don't get marked on whether it's real or whether it's not real. That's not where you get the marks. Okay. I hope that answers the question. Okay, so this is what I want you to do now for 3 minutes. So my initial example, meeting someone for a date, okay? It then becomes a 55-year-old widowed man, widowed meaning his wife passed away, okay? So a 55-year-old widowed man is going to meet the first woman he has liked since his wife died 10 years prior, okay? Meaning 10 years before. So this is adding some emotion to this story, okay? Because he's someone who's lost his wife. So it's not just someone going on a date, random date, they're bored, and then they're just going to see what happens. This is someone who was married before, they lost their wife, okay? Their wife died, and this is the first person that they liked, okay? The first woman that they've liked since their wife has passed away. So it's adding an emotive aspect to the story, because if this goes wrong, okay, it's going to have, it's going to be a huge emotional setback because they haven't really liked anyone else since their wife died, okay? So I want you to spend the next 3 minutes adding some emotive detail to your story, okay, to your scenario. That's going to help it be more emotive, and that will add a layer of idea. So for mine, again, I'll go through it. The fact that It's gone from just being a man to being a widowed man. Okay, he's an older man. He's 55. Okay, he lost his wife, so it's adding a layer of complexity to the story. Also, the fact that he hasn't liked anyone else since his wife died, it adds that layer of um, emotional stakes. If this goes wrong, it might be a big setback for him. Okay, so 3 minutes, just 3 minutes for this. Have a think about how you can add some details that make your scenario more emotive. Okay, so put the timer on for 3 minutes, starting now. Okay, halfway through, just over a minute left. Again, think about some details that you can add to your scenario to make it more complex, more emotional. Okay, really good. I like that, and I like that you've added that that detail about her being very tall. Okay, that's feeding into the story. The fact that she's feeling left out, the fact that she can't find something that fits her, like everybody else. Good, very good. You can develop that into a really good story. Very well done. Okay, so that's a great example. Um, Ina. Nina, I hope I'm pronouncing that right. I'm so sorry, I can't hear you pronounce it properly. But yes, very good. So by you adding that again, that idea of her being tall, okay, that detail about her height, and using that through your story to feed in that theme of being left out and not being able to fit in is excellent. Okay, so that's the kind of detail I'm looking for. Add a detail that will add an emotive aspect to your story. Okay, so well done. Right. So now I want you to um, write your opening paragraphs. Okay, we're moving on to writing your opening paragraph. Now, what I've done here, I have used the first paragraph of the story that we read to start with, and I've broken down what the writer has done in each sentence. Okay. And this is something, I'm so sorry, I didn't realize that I'm getting darker and darker. I don't know why the lighting is so dim. Okay. So, excuse me. You can hardly see me. I'm sorry about that. So when it comes to the writing, okay, what I've done is I've looked at what the writer has done in each sentence, okay? So sentence one, you can describe the weather using a short sentence, like they've done. It was snowing again. Sentence two, the writer has zoomed in and they've used a metaphor in that one, okay? Gentle, six-pointed flakes from a picture book were settling on her jacket sleeve, okay? They've zoomed in, they've used a language technique, and they've referred to the main character using a pronoun, her jacket sleeve. They haven't gone into much detail about the character, but they have zoomed in on an aspect of, they have zoomed in on the character themselves, but not given too much detail. And then in the final sentence, it's a longer sentence, okay? You can describe your where your character is. So you can think about the setting in a bit more detail. Perhaps use a list of three and refer to your main character again using a pronoun like he, she, his, her. So 5 minutes to do that. Now, how you can take this forward, this is something that you can observe even in your exam when you've got the inserts. Obviously, don't copy because that's just going to get your paper trashed in the bin, okay? You're not copying, but you can look at the way the writer has structured their work and you can copy that, okay? So things like that, you can definitely take inspiration from in the same way that I've done there. Break down how each sentence is working, okay? And do the same for yours. So I want you to do that for your opening paragraph and we'll spend we're running out of time, so maybe 4-5 minutes, okay? Starting now. And you are using your scenario here, okay? So the scenario that you thought of, you're now putting it into practice and you're using some of those things that we talked about earlier on as well, vocabulary, language technique, structure techniques as well, but follow what's in the green box. Sentence one, describe the weather using a short sentence. Sentence two, zoom in on one part of the weather using a simile. And then sentence three, describe where your character is. For example, you can use a list of three there, okay? So just follow what's in the green box to guide each sentence. Okay, so hopefully you've been able to make a start. I know it wasn't very long. Um, Hopefully you've been able to make a start, okay, and on your opening paragraph. And this is just to give you an idea of how you can use um, texts to help you, which is why people say that reading makes you a better writer, okay, because you're observing how it's done well and then doing the same. Again, you are not copying the writing itself, however, you are copying maybe the structure or the techniques. And obviously, if you copy, it's plagiarism and you will get your paper struck off. Okay, so that's not what I'm um, talking about. I'm talking about looking at how the writer maybe structures and organizes their work and aiming to use that in your own writing. Okay, so if you if you want to share any of that, then feel free again to type in the comments. But I hope that that's been helpful. Okay, and again, just to make sure I recap, the most value you can get from this is if you actually plan. Okay, so some of the things that we've looked at is if you plan and take that plan into the exam. Okay, so memorize a set of words that you know you're going to use. Okay, some plan techniques and write the sentences out that you are going to use. I've just read it's the language techniques that are missing from that screen. Okay, so language techniques that you're going to use, take them with you. Okay, don't go in there blank. Okay, and if you have enjoyed this video, if you've benefited, please just leave a like. It helps the video be seen by other people as well who might benefit from it. And if you are interested in actually joining one of my writing classes, then you can do. And you can book on my website, www.danaithetutor.com. And I have writing classes every Thursday from 6 to 7 p.m. And what we've done today are some of the things that we do, as well as looking at nonfiction as well. But if you're interested in that, you can email me or you can just book your lessons on my website. But thank you everyone for joining me. I'm so sorry that my lighting seems to have gone, but yes, well done everyone, and thank you for joining. And hopefully, I'll see you next week. Have a good week. You're welcome. Bye. I'm glad you found it helpful.